The next time you're standing in front of that massive wall of plastic wrap steaks at Costco, I want you to look past the Prime stickers and the USDA choice labels. Most people think they're getting the ultimate deal just because the price per pound is lower than the local grocery chain. But there is a massive difference between a bargain and actual value, and if you don't know how to read the hidden language of the meat department, you're likely leaving the best cuts for someone else. Or worse, paying a premium for something that's been sitting in the back for days. I've spent over 15 years in the food supply and butchery industry, seeing exactly how these high-volume operations run from the inside out. I'm not here to tell you Costco meat is bad. Far from it. In fact, their supply chain is one of the most sophisticated in the world. But because they move such an incredible volume of product, there are specific operational quirks and processing secrets that the average shopper never notices. I know, sounds a bit conspiracy theory, but stick with me here. Once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. It's the difference between a dry, tough Sunday roast and a melt-in-your-mouth experience that makes your guests think you spent triple what you actually did. If you're tired of playing meat roulette every time you host a barbecue, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm Cody, and we're pulling back the curtain on the things the warehouse staff isn't exactly lining up to tell you. Here's the thing that drives me crazy. Most shoppers walk straight to the brightest red steak they can find. It looks fresh, right? Wrong. In the industry, we know that bright red color is often just a result of oxygen exposure, not necessarily quality or age. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real secret starts with something called blade tenderization. If you look at the fine print on almost every steak in that case, specifically the Kirkland Signature ones, you'll see a disclaimer that the meat has been mechanically tenderized. Now, you might be asking, Cody, isn't tender meat a good thing? Usually, yes. But here is the catch the USDA won't tell you loudly. When they run those needles through the meat to break up the fibers, they're also potentially pushing surface bacteria right into the center of your steak. This is why the label tells you to cook your beautiful ribeye to an internal temperature of 160 degrees. Think about that for a second. That's a well-done steak. If you like your meat medium rare, the way a 15-year veteran like me insists on eating it, you're technically taking a safety risk that Costco has to legally disclose, but they definitely don't highlight it. But it gets even more interesting when you look at the chub packs. Most people walk right past those giant, 10-pound tubes of ground beef because they look intimidating or industrial. That is your first big mistake. While the pre-patted burgers and the smaller styrofoam trays look more convenient, they are often the exact same meat marked up significantly for the labor of packaging. If you want the secret menu of the meat department, you have to stop shopping with your eyes and start shopping with a strategy. Now, before we get into the specific ways to bypass the display tax, I need to tell you about the roadshow factor. This is where the real high-end stuff hides, and if you aren't timing your visits, you're missing out on restaurant-grade cuts that never even make it to the main floor. Now, let's talk about the golden ticket in that case, something I like to call the subprimal secret. When you look at those perfectly portioned 4-packs of New York strips or ribeyes, you are paying for more than just the meat. You are paying for the labor, the plastic, the foam tray, and, most importantly, the trimming loss. But here is the kicker. You don't have to play that game. If you have a decent knife and 10 minutes of patience at home, you can walk up to that meat window, give it a firm knock, and ask for a cryovac or a whole subprimal. This is the meat exactly as it arrives from the packing plant, untrimmed, unprodded by those tenderizing needles we talked about, and vacuum sealed. Not only is it the cleanest version of the meat you can buy, but the price per pound often drops by $2 or even $3. On a 15-pound loin, you're essentially getting a couple of premium steaks for free just by doing the slicing yourself. Now, you might be thinking, Cody, I'm not a professional butcher. I don't want to mess up a $200 piece of beef. I get it. But it's actually harder to mess up than you think. And while you're at that window, there's another secret menu item you need to look for: the ribeye cap. In the industry, we call this the spinalis dorsi. It is, pound for pound, the most flavorful, marbled, and tender part of the entire cow. At most high-end steakhouses, a ribeye cap steak will easily run you $70 or $80. Costco is one of the only major retailers that actually separates these out, rolls them up, and sells them as standalone steaks. They are pricey, sure, usually the most expensive thing in the case, but compared to restaurant prices, it's a steal. But wait, because it actually gets even more insider than that. Have you ever noticed those packs of shabu shabu? Or the top sirloin caps? If you're a fan of Brazilian steakhouses, that sirloin cap is what they call picanha. It's a cult favorite cut that is usually hidden in plain sight. Most shoppers skip it because they don't recognize the name, but for a 15-year vet like me, that's the budget steak that eats like a luxury cut. But here is the part that really separates the pros from the amateurs: the grading gap. We've all been conditioned to think Prime is always better than Choice. But because of the sheer volume Costco moves, the lines get blurred. I have frequently found Choice grade loins in the back that have better intramuscular marbling than the Prime loins sitting right next to them. The secret? Don't just look at the grade. Look for the bloom. If you see a Choice pack with those tiny white flecks of fat distributed evenly through the muscle, grab it. You're getting Prime quality at a Choice price point. Now, you might be asking, if I'm buying in bulk to save money, how do I know I'm not getting the scraps from yesterday's shipments? That leads us directly into the hidden language of the labels and the one specific day of the week you should, and shouldn't, be buying your meat if you want the absolute peak of that supply chain. Now, let's talk about the label language. If you look at the date on those Costco packs, you're only seeing the pack date. But that doesn't tell you the whole story of how long that primal has been aging in a vacuum-sealed bag before it ever touched a styrofoam tray. In my 15 years in the industry, I've learned that beef actually improves with a little bit of time, a process called wet aging. When you buy those whole cryovac bags I mentioned earlier, you can actually let them sit in your own refrigerator for an extra week or two. The enzymes break down the connective tissue, and suddenly that warehouse meat tastes like a $100 dry-aged steak from a high-end boutique. But here is the catch. Once they break those seals and tray the meat up in the back, the clock starts ticking fast. Most people think Saturday morning is the best time to shop because the shelves are overflowing. That is the biggest mistake you can make. Saturday is volume day. The cutters are working at breakneck speed to keep up with the crowds. If you want the most precise cuts, the ones where the butcher actually took the time to trim the silver skin and the heavy fat caps, you want to show up on a Tuesday or Wednesday morning. That's when the A-team is usually on the saws, and they aren't under the crushing pressure of a 5,000-person Saturday rush. But it gets even deeper. Have you ever noticed those 9.97-inch prices? If you see a meat item ending in 97, that is a manager's special. It usually means they overordered a specific cut, maybe a seasonal lamb rack or a specific Wagyu shipment, and they need it gone now. That is the only time you should ever deviate from your shopping list. It's the insider's clearance, and it's where the real profit stays in your pocket instead of theirs. Now, I know I've given you a lot to process. Between the blade tenderization risks, the Chub Pack savings, and the midweek shopping hack, your next Costco trip is going to look a lot different. But before you head out, there's one final thing you need to remember. The return policy applies to the meat department, too. If you get home, open that pack, and it smells off or the quality isn't what was promised, take it back. Costco's reputation is built on that membership fee, not on selling you a bad roast. They would rather lose $50 on a refund than lose a $120 a year member. If this deep dive helped you navigate the warehouse a little better, do me a favor and drop a comment below. Tell me the best hidden gem you've ever found in the Costco meat aisle. And if you haven't yet, make sure you've liked the video so I can keep bringing you these industry secrets.